I guess before I start talking, this is going to be a series of workshops. So while you guys are waiting, make an account on Heroku. Okay. So hi guys, my name's Andrew. I wasn't here the first week, but today I'll be talking about deployment and also some good code practices / debugging. So we're going to be deploying using Heroku. Deployment is surprisingly non-trivial. There are engineers whose jobs is to just deploy things and make sure things are working. Like the place I interned last summer, one of the other interns, his entire project was to deploy something. So it'll take a while, don't leave it to the last moment. And also I want you guys to make your own repo on GitHub. You can call it whatever you want, but I'll be calling it deploy test. And this is because when we deploy on Heroku, you can't deploy repositories owned by other people. So what we'll be doing is we'll be copying a repository, pushing it to your personal GitHub, and then deploying it.
When you guys are done with the 3 steps, just raise your hand.
Can I get a show of hands if you're still doing these steps? Okay. And at any point, if you guys have questions, just raise your hand. There's going to be a lot of hands-on stuff. Does anyone still need more time? This is it. Or do we need a USB? Okay, so for the next steps, we're going to clone a repo. We're going to change the origin of like where you're going to push to. So we're going to set. Essentially, we're going to copy the Catholic deploy repo, and we're going to push it to your personal GitHub, and then from there, we'll be doing other things too. But just like copy and paste all these commands. And let us know if something breaks.
Make sure you put your own URL.
You're not HND. As much as we all would like to be.
So instead of deploy test.git, it's going to be your Git. So just to repeat that for everyone doing the third step, for set URL, look at your own repository and it will give you, the link that you click to download it, when you clone it, that's what you're going to put for origin. If this breaks, just raise your hand.
It should be like whatever this is right here. Does anyone still need more time? Where there's a bracket in your test update. Oh, you have to be in the directory of Catholic. Yeah. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
Just repeat that. If git remote set URL is not working, make sure you cd into the directory first.
You don't put the brackets. still having issues? Eric, back there.
Is anyone's not working? Okay.
So we're taking like, we're pushing it to the person. Because you can only deploy things. We want to take this URL. So we're changing. Okay. Raise your hand if it's still broken. You should use HTTPS unless you set up like the SSH tokens for, right? No.
Just use HTTPS.
Yeah.
None of this.
Or
It's not part of education. It's actually not, but don't use it.
Okay, anyways, he's alive. Moving on Heroku, we're going to set up a new project and try to deploy this branch. I have like some slides with pictures in the following slides. So if you open up the presentation, it'll be a lot easier. I'm just going to leave these instructions up for now. So on like Heroku.com, follow these directions. I also have pictures that tell you the exact steps that follow this slide, like this. So if you just open it up in a new tab, it'll help you out. So what you want to do is you want to hit new app on Heroku.com. And then you'll have to enter a name. This name has to be unique for you because this will actually be like on the web, so you can't like steal someone else's name. You just type in something. And then once you're here, you go to the middle and you want to connect it to GitHub. And then search for the repository that you just made. So this would probably be deploy test if you were following along with the previous slide.
Okay, so what you're doing, this is even broken now. You have SSH set up. Some people have GitHub. Go to your Riga. Is this it? So you see right now how you message toggle?
Do we get this? Or? Yeah. Raise your hand if you still need more time. So once you do all these steps, there should be like a View App button. And if you click that, you will see that nothing will work. And if you try to see why, like if you open the developer console on Google Chrome, it won't show you because that only covers the front end. And there's like a backend error. The way you can view the logs is through the web app. At the top, you click more and then view logs. This will show you like the backend logs of what went wrong. So does anyone know what happened to our app? So the log just spits out like some garbage, and it's not very revealing because it doesn't give you a good error message. If you Google it, you'll get something that tells you basically this, which means nothing to us right now. So I'll cover what like this process.env is. So to start off, like what is an environment variable? It's a variable that belongs to the environment that you run a process in. So this is how we're going to hide API secrets, so people can just like delete all of the data in our database, and people can like make trades on our behalf if you're using like Robinhood or something. So you can actually like check in your terminal some common variables like home and path. You can just type like echo, and here you can see like the output of each one. And what we're going to do is we're going to set variables for our API secrets such that the processes can use these variables without having them written in plain text somewhere. So we'll create an end file that contains all of our secrets, but instead of just having this and committing it to production, like this is not what we want to do. We want to hide all of this. So we're going to create an end file, as I was talking about earlier, and this end file will live in your project's root directory. And since we don't want to commit it to GitHub, we want to add this to the git ignore. And once you do this, it'll be more or less idiot-proof. Like you really have to try to add it, and Git won't really let you unless you force it. Here's an example screen of what happens if you try to add the end file, or you just try to add everything. So like git add dot or git add star will ignore the end file. Even if you try to add the end file directly, you have to use the -f flag to force Git to add. So just to recap, we want to keep all of these API secrets hidden, so we're going to be using an end file that lives on each user's individual machine. And because of this, because we're not sharing it through GitHub, each person needs to have it on their own computer. So communicate like these API tokens somehow secretly. You can use like Facebook Messenger, use email, use whatever, but do not put it on Git. And how we're going to use it is we're going to use a package called .m that will automatically load the end file. You can load it manually with terminal commands, but with this package, it'll take care of all of that for you. So in app.js, we just need to add the line require.m.config. And we want to do this at the top because there might be lines underneath that say like require mongoose something something, and that mongoose line might break because it relies on a configuration from the .m that tells mongoose like what database URL to connect. And in most of the code, this is already done, but just make sure that these two things exist if you're trying to use a .m file. So this is what the process.m.sum token means. It's actually taking the variable that we set in the .m file before, and it's substituting it in here. And the way you would call the variable is you just type process.m.variable name. The convention is to use all caps and use underscores. So if you notice in app.js, we have process.m.port for 3000, because if the variable doesn't exist, it will by default be null, and then the OR will default to port 3000. So if you run this thing on localhost without setting the port environment variable, your app will be on port 3000, whereas with something like Heroku, you can't specify what port to use. And so Heroku will rely on process.m.port. And this is exactly what the Stack Overflow error message says. It says that like, you can't fix Heroku to a port, so instead you need to add process.m.port. Are there any questions so far? So in our app that we deployed to Heroku, in line 24, we want to change the line to read process.m.port for 3000. And then after you do that, try redeploy. Also, when you make this change, Heroku reads from Git in order to deploy. So after you change this, you have to commit and push to your own repository, and then reload the app on Heroku, because Heroku will then reload the app from Git. And raise your hand if you need help. They've changed line 24 in app.js to read this. And just to reiterate, we need to change line 24 in app.js to read port equals process n port or 3000, because Heroku doesn't let us specify the port. So we're going to let Heroku give us the port by writing process.n. So is it on your own repository? So if you go .m doesn't really matter for this process,
Yeah.
or for this app specifically, but we're going to be using it in a future deployment.
For this specifically.
You should be deploying step 0 because if you deploy complete, that already has all the answers in it. It'll probably work, but it kind of bypasses the point of the work job.
That's what you need. Yeah. What's up, guys? That's good. No, it's not there. That's bad. Yo, or actually, Andrew, you know, like some people don't have like DB.js in the things they put.
Yeah, it's not a step 0.
It's not a step 0.
Not a step 0. It's actually.
Okay, so
Okay.
it should be in what? They should be in what? Complete or step 1?
It's step 0.
Should be in step 0, but
For some, most people it's working. Just go to
Mine does not have a DB that
just get a chicken. Can you go to the repo? And yeah, we got it. Wait, they didn't need DB.js.
is this?
Well, because Zach's gonna access the workshop.
DB.js is like the second.
Yes, that's the third workshop. Wait, why do we need?
Yeah,
there's no
you don't-
there's no DB access in this workshop. We're not
Yeah,
doing
there
DB
is
stuff.
none. So we're
Sure.
There's not meant to be. There's not meant to be.
Yeah,
DB.js.
No, those are there's never going to be any posts on it.
Yes.
Sure.
Because we're doing this is the first step. We're not doing DB stuff.
Okay. Right, sorry for the confusion. Does anyone still need more time? Did everyone try to deploy it after
I was
writing
getting
report?
I was getting baited. You don't need DB.js.
I
never said you didn't have it.
At the bottom of Heroku, yes.
Correct, but you don't have it.
Deploy step 0.
Quarter.
Just so we're on the same page. You're deploying Zach's workshop. That is deploying Epic.
Yes.
Because what we want to know is process. Which was a good HTTPS. Then and then on the next step.
I'm going to move on. If you guys have done everything correctly so far, it's going to fail again actually. And if you open up the JavaScript console, you'll get this mixed content warning. So does anyone know what is wrong or what we should fix? What was that?
HTTP.
Yes, we need to use HTTPS. So you have to use HTTPS because of certain security reasons. Specifically that you requested the Heroku website with HTTPS, so you can't like break the security and then use HTTP, which this cat book is doing by pulling the feed. So in public/js/feed on the first line, we want to change the line to use HTTPS instead of HTTP. And then after you do this, try adding, committing, pushing to Git, and then redeploying from Heroku again, and then it should finally work. And if you're having trouble, you can just check out complete, in which the branch has all the answers and it's already done. But I wanted to illustrate that deployment is a pain. This took me like a lot of time too, because I just thought we could take the Catbook workshop and throw it on Heroku, but it turns out not. So definitely don't leave this until the last moment, because it'll give you a lot of trouble.
I thought we fixed that. Ryan's gonna be so disappointed. Zach's workshop doesn't have your inner HTML fixer. Yeah, this one is still broken.
So if you just want to deploy the complete branch, you need to check it out and push it from Git first, put it in the command line. I'm not sure I have. It says this. So if anybody can I see yes. So you need to push it to Git because Heroku sees the code. Does that make sense? No, you need to Git add.
Sure. User interface,
That will add everything.
and now in the command line, we'll start to
Type a message.
sure. Just type
escape. This is a Maybe you skip a little bit. Does anyone still need help? And before we move on, are there any questions about what we've done so far? I'm going to assume that everyone has successfully deployed Capo deploy. So what we're going to cover next is how to use OAuth and certain Google APIs. So if you want to use OAuth, you can follow along with this next workshop, in which we'll start off by going to console.developers.google.com and make sure to make an account. And from there, we will be creating a project and we'll be searching for Google Plus API. And if you do want to follow along, it's a lot easier if you have the slides pulled up, because I have pictures of where to click, but I can't put that all up on the screen. So after you create a project, you want to search for the Google Plus API, and then I'm going to wait here for those of you who want to follow along, so we're all on the same page. Yes? That's okay. So after you have the Google Plus API selected, you need to create some credentials. So in the credentials tab, you want to create OAuth credentials. And if you don't have this screen, just hit the credentials tab again. I had this weird error. And what this should lead you is it should lead you to some OAuth consent screen, where you'll have to give an application name, privacy policy. We don't really care about that. We're just going to put some random application name for test purposes, and then we're going to hit save. And after you've done that, you can then create credentials.
Or even better,
And this part is really important. It is probably the step that like most people get wrong, or most people like don't get working. There was a Piazza post, Piazza question actually yesterday about this. So once you're in the credentials, there's going to be a restrictions field where you can enter authorized JavaScript origins and also authorized redirect URIs. And you want to enter the websites in which you want to use OAuth with. So if you want to use this OAuth token with like your local just development where you do like localhost 3000, in the JavaScript origins you want to put the protocol, so HTTP, and then localhost :3000. And then for the authorized redirect URIs, you want to do the same thing, but also with the additional /auth/google/callback. And the reason we need to do this is because Google doesn't want everybody to be using your token. So you need to specify your own websites for this token. Maybe just because like everyone. And then you need a project first, that's fine. That's cool. Like after this. Raise your hand if you need help. You might also need to create a project before you can create tokens. I kind of skipped over that, but it's all in the slides.
Oh. Yeah, like I swear it wasn't like that last time.
So now if you followed all the steps correctly, you can try deploying an application that will use these Google OAuth credentials. I have another Git repository set up for you. This one's at gitclone something OAuth.git. And this one we're just going to run locally, so you don't have to do all that garbage with like the origin, setting the URL. And you'll notice that I included a .n in the repo, which is extremely bad. But I did that so you guys wouldn't have to remake it. It doesn't have any of the API secrets in there. You guys will have to fill it out yourselves. Specifically like the passport, DB, passport.js, db.js, and the end file is broken and requires like you to fix it. And in case you guys don't remember what to put in the end file, it should look something like this, where you like fill out the Google Client ID and Google Client secret, the credentials that you just made. And then for the Atlas SRV link, just use Corey's Atlas SRV from the workshop, which is here, so you can copy and paste it. And I also want to remind you guys that with the end file, make sure you put .m in the git ignore so you don't commit all your secrets to GitHub. I've already done this, but just another reminder. Let me know if you need help. The staff will also come help. And in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. The first workshop took a little longer than expected. That's okay, because I have all the instructions here if you want to follow along later at home. If you want to look at the answers, they are at git checkout local, but you probably need to put in your own Google Client ID/secret because either it's blank right now or I have Corey's OAuth credentials in, which won't work, or I believe they won't work. Essentially, the changes that you had to put in the exercise, though, was that in each of the locations where there was like some Google Client ID or Atlas SRV, we want to set that equal to process.m dot some variable name, where we define that variable name in the .m file. And also, in the interest of time, we're going to skip the rest of the workshop steps, but I'll just walk through it really quickly. So, if you want to make this website public, there are some steps that you need to do before Heroku can deploy it. Specifically, in package.json, the script is set up to use NodeMon and not Node. Sometimes this will work if you don't change it back to Node, but the way we set up these package.jsons is we have NodeMon only installed as a developer dependency, which means that if you try to run it on Heroku in production mode, your app will crash and it will give you a really crappy error message and won't really tell you why. So make sure to change NodeMon to Node. What's also important is to set the Heroku equivalent of the .m files. And you can do this by going to the top menu in Heroku, and you'll have various tabs. You want to go to the rightmost tab, which should say settings or something. We can find out really quick. But essentially, it gives you a list of secrets, and you want to type in the secrets that you put in the .m file, and Heroku will keep these confidential. So here you can see I've typed in like the Google Client ID, the Atlas SRV link. You just want to put in all your secrets here because you haven't put your .m file in GitHub, so Heroku can't read it because it only reads from GitHub. And once you've deployed this application on Heroku, you also need to add the Heroku links to the authorized domains and authorized redirect URIs on the Google Developer Console. And this is because the Google Developer Console, it limits which websites can use your token. And because we have another website that we want to use our own token, we need to add this. And make sure you add both of them. Finally, if you try redeploying this and you followed all the steps exactly, it should work. But in the interest of time, again, we're not going to go through with this. And if you want to deploy a React application, I'm also just going to walk through the steps really quickly. Don't worry about this. If you remember, in the React application, we ran like a dev server with Webpack, and then we ran the Node backend separately. And just to recap, Webpack is a module bundler that takes a lot of dependencies, bundles them together, and then delivers like one big bundle to the front end to use. So whereas like npm install is installing packages on our backend, Webpack is gathering these modules and compiling them for the front end. So we need to tell Heroku to compile both like the backend and the front end. So the differences between just like doing it on your own machine and on Heroku is that in package.json in scripts, we need to add a line that says Heroku post build. And you can just copy paste this Webpack, like this Webpack command. And what Heroku will do is it will run Webpack, compile everything, and then like everything should work out. I've tested this, and you can play like the React snake game. I'm gonna upload the link so you guys can see for yourselves.
That's my fault. So I programmed Snake for one player. So if multiple people are on it, whoever gets there first gets to control the snake and everyone else gets there. And this is the way the WebSocket is set up. So you can just go and watch whoever got there first. You can't control the snake. So, sorry.
But also like some more notes on Webpack. When you run npx Webpack, this stands for npm run Webpack. The extra flags in here is we're telling it to use like this config file. We want it to give us a progress bar. And then -p is like a macro for some like production flags. So it'll try to like minimize your code. It'll try to like make it smaller, make it faster. And if you go to if you go to this link, I've deployed it. Oh god. I realized the name is not the greatest.
Sorry, I should have closed that.
But like this is the Heroku link. So it's like all deployed. All I made is I made these 4 changes. So I let the port be set by Heroku. For some reason, localhost is hard-coded in the original code, so we need to remove that in this line.
That is also,
And then we've added this Heroku post build line. So.
Can you turn your sound up?
No.
This was not my fault.
As you can see,
So I've tested this at home, and it does work with one person. I suspect this might be because of multiple people, or I'm just deploying the wrong branch.
Wait, it's probably because a lot of people logged on and then your Heroku servers are trying to do 10 billion NPX Webpack.
So it only npx
Oh, no,
Webpacks
only
when you
deploy.
start.
Yeah, okay, just kidding. Well, Snake is meant to be a single player game. Oh, wait, someone probably got a game.
Yeah, I got a game over, then I refresh and the game stopped.
Oh,
Okay.
uh,
The sound's off on my computer.
oh.
Anyway,
That's not a thing that you plug in. That's just like coded Snake badly.
Anyways, if you got nothing from this lecture, make sure to use Heroku to deploy, and if you deploy React, you have to add this one line. And I'm going to go over some like debugging / code style things really quickly in the 10 minutes we have left.
and then we'll do the last raffle.
Okay, so programming do's, don'ts, debugging, and general code style advice. What we do want to do is we do want to use configs. You don't want to use magic numbers directly. Like Snake React did a very good job of this in that the cells was set as a config. It was like set to 30 in something called config.js. And everywhere where you wanted to read like the width of the rows, it would just import this variable from config.js. I was going to originally show this, but I'm just going to tell you guys that we do this in the interest of time. You don't want to write magic numbers because you'll think it's like, oh, it's like convenient now. Like, why would I want to do all the setup with just one magic number? But it'll quickly spiral out of control. So make sure to use configs. Also come to a consensus on code style. Linked is an Airbnb guide to code style on JavaScript. It covers most modern JavaScript stuff. I don't expect you to read all of it or even follow all of it, but just don't like piss off your teammates. Don't write code where if you read like one section, it just doesn't make sense compared to the next section.
There's also one for React. Airbnb also has really good coding style.
And like there are linters to check your style. I don't expect you to use them, but I just want to tell you guys that it's out there. And also make sure to use the correct syntax highlighting, especially if you're coding in React. There's like special JSX highlighters out there. It will make your life a lot easier. For example, in Sublime Text, if I just open Snake React, half the file will be like yellow and red in random characters, and it just looks really gross, and you can't debug anything. Do not use Git like an ape. Even in like 6.131, you all push to the same branch, and you all push to master, and there's like horrible merge conflicts everywhere. So never force push, and make sure you run like a git status before you git add, just so you know what's going to happen. If you're a control freak, you can even add all the files individually, but this is kind of tedious, so I don't expect you guys to do it. And then before you commit or push, you want to git pull to see like your progress changes. That way you won't get into any merge conflicts. But I do know that they're going to happen. So just like a brief primer on merge conflicts, you'll have like a bunch of arrows, and then it'll give a commit. It'll have one version changes, and then it'll be like a line, and then the next version changes. So you have to decide which one you want. So you have to like delete all the delimiters and choose the correct code. After you do this, you should test the code to make sure it works as intended, and then you want to add, commit, and push. And in terms of how to debug effectively, these slides used to be written by a guy called Monday. I thought his lecture was hilarious, but Aaron said his slides were shit. I'm going to keep some of his slides anyways. So he said that he's debugging 200 lines of code and doesn't work. How can I do this? You just don't be in that place to begin with. So that's why I was talking about good code style. If you have good code style and good coding practices, you will not have as many bugs. But if you do have bugs, this is how to debug. And I know this slide isn't the greatest either, but notice that read and think have 2 numbers there. Because that's what you start with. Like, I don't want to single anyone out, or I don't want to talk about specific errors, but when you guys post things like, oh, like I'm having this error, what do I do? The staff probably like doesn't know what to do either. We just come over, and what we do is we read the error message. And typically the first line will tell you most of the things you need to know. And if it doesn't, think about like more than just the error, but think about what you wrote in the code that could have made it go wrong. And if you haven't figured out a solution yet, you can then turn to Google, which is what I did for like the process.m.port. And then you also want to iterate on small changes, specifically when trying to fix a bug, because then you can narrow down the bug in that you know that like some certain section of code is already good and it's already safe. So you can move on to the next section, and eventually you'll find where your bug is. If you still can't find the bug, I would suggest you to take a break and come back later. A lot of bugs are caused by very, very small errors that are just like syntax, or like you didn't read the documentation correctly. So it's very important to have a good attention to detail, but also like a good understanding of the higher level architecture in terms of how the entire application is built. So even though you guys will probably do this, in that you'll split up all the work of your app, and if like 2 parts written by 2 different people, they don't work together, it's just like nobody knows what's going on. I would suggest you to work together on things, pair program. When someone decides to commit to master, read their code and understand understand what's going on, because that way it'll make debugging a lot easier. And more on the attention to detail. Be very careful when you read documentation, and be very careful what you're actually doing. These are 2 different functions in JavaScript to find a substring, but if you use the substring, just a sub str, and you give it 1, 4, it will include the 4th character. Whereas if you use the word substring, it will go from the 1st character and end before the 4th character. So just be very careful what you're doing. You don't have to code that fast, but just make sure that you test everything and that you test small changes. Finally, I'm going to cover some practical tools you can use. So the developer console is your best friend. I guess a specific distinction between this and the backend console where you run npm start or npx webpack is that the developer console is usually attached to your browser, so it's attached to Chrome or Firefox. And what it does is it displays the front end print statements that you put. So in in Express, when you have a hook to catch a certain route, if you put console.log inside that hook, that console.log will be printed in the developer console. Whereas in app.js, if you put a console.log, that will be output in your server console, so the terminal or the Heroku ones. And the developer console is good because it lets you see print statements, which is pretty good. But it also lets you preview CSS changes. It lets you run JavaScript, and you can even set breakpoints. You can just call a command called debugger. It's like a JavaScript function, and I'll show you guys really quickly. But what this does is it lets you step through your code. It lets you set breakpoints. Again, this is all really useful. Personally, I don't really use the breakpoints in the code debugger, but I'll just show you guys. So this is the Chrome debugger, and you can run JavaScript here. And then there's something called debugger, which I was talking about earlier. So this is the debugger interface, and this is step over. If you guys haven't seen this before, that's okay. But what it lets you do is it lets you run through every single line one by one, and then it stops at every line. So that you can then observe things, you can type things, you can call functions. So for example, I could then search up what is the value of x, and we already know it's 5 because I haven't done anything special. But you can probably see how this is useful. Finally, there's this CSS previewer. So before you make changes on the code that you have, you can just change it in here and see how it looks. So here you can click this little square, and instead of black, you just choose a value. And while stuff might not be changing here because I haven't selected the right thing, if you have your app up and running and you inspect element, you can dynamically change the CSS properties, and then it'll update appropriately in the browser. This will not change your code though. So once you're happy with your changes, make sure to port them over to your code. Yeah, so just to recap, you should test in small chunks, and you should write your code in small chunks so you can test these parts in isolation. Like the worst thing is to write this gigantic monolith and then there's a bunch of bugs and you don't know why it's working. And also you want to make your debugging loop as low as possible in your environment. And what this means is that the debugging loop is the loop between making a change in your app and then testing it. So you want to have this little loop be as low as possible, meaning it's functioning on as little code as possible, and it's functioning on like the lowest level components, not the highest level app. So instead of testing your app by like testing it as a user, going through the front end, making requests to the back end, and then clicking a bunch of buttons, you want to just like verify that, say, like 3 statements on the back end are working by doing a quick console.log after a certain setup. I'm going to skip the rest. I guess Aaron will get to the. But there are more slides. There are more slides if you guys want to check them out.